We're going to kick off this morning with our Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. He is serving in his second term as Speaker, having been elected by the House of Representatives to serve as their leader. But more importantly, he's doing it in a manner that shows he's focused on Mississippi. Y'all may recall, early in his tenure, he pushed for and got passed the first major teacher pay raise that we've seen in the state of Mississippi in several years. He's made education a priority. He's made workforce development a priority. He has continued to lead the House on focusing on things that are going to make a difference in the state of Mississippi. Will you please join me in welcoming Philip Gunn?
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for that welcome. It is great to see you here today. This is always an exciting day for us here at the Capitol. We have been in here for 2 days. It's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, and a lot of fresh legs that are going to get tired real quickly as the session moves along. It's always a highlight to see you, to greet you. Thank you for coming and being a part of this. We are in our third day, and so you've caught us very early, but still I think we've done some things in the last 2 days that are going to be pleasing to you, and I want to talk about those very briefly for just a few minutes. I have met with your leaders and enjoyed that meeting, and one of the things that made that meeting so enjoyable was the fact that the priorities of this organization line up with the priorities of the House of Representatives, I think, this year. I met with them early on. They talked about two things that were really on the radar. One is a continued emphasis on roads and bridges, and a continued emphasis on workforce development. I'm pleased because those are the things that we in the House have been focused on as well. I don't know, I stood before you last year and I told you that we were going to take the road and bridge issue very seriously. We were going to engage. We were going to make sure that we devoted some time and energy trying to find solutions, and I think we did that by the end of the session last year. We brought forward about 4 different ideas, and we continued to search for ideas throughout the summer. This year we're going to come forward with not only those same 4 ideas, but some others as well. And yesterday, second day of the session, 3 of my committees in the House met and passed out some of those ideas. And we're going to continue to meet. Today, we hope to take those up on the House floor. So I think that demonstrates to you just how serious we are about trying to find a solution to the road and bridge issue. Some of those ideas include a $50 million bond bill right off the top. Half of that money would go to cities, half of that would go to counties to help them find a way to repair bridges and roads in their areas. Another idea is to use a fund that we have that would be used as leverage to generate another $100 million in addition to that to be used for roads and bridges. We have an idea that would involve growth, a growth trigger. If our economy grows by more than 2%, we would use a portion of those dollars for roads and bridges. We've encouraged MDOT to find savings within their agency. And we've agreed that if they could redirect up to $25 million away from administration and other things and put it into roads and bridges, we would try to match that. All of these ideas bring forward pieces of money, chunks of money that can be used to address the road and bridge problem. All of these ideas take money out of existing dollars or out of growth, which we think is a very solid, conservative approach to finding a solution. As I said, we passed some of these ideas out of the committee yesterday. We're going to try to take them up on the House floor today, and I think that demonstrates a serious commitment on our part to this issue. The second issue we talked about with your leaders is workforce development. The House has been very serious about workforce development over the last 6 years. I have an entire list here I'm going to go through with you about things that we have, ideas that we have put forward. But it used to be that when we pursued businesses in this state, they would come and say, how much are you going to give us? What incentives are you going to give us? That seemed to be their number one priority. That seems to have changed now. The number one question we get now is, do you have an educated, reliable, qualified workforce? And if we're going to prosper in Mississippi, we got to have a solid answer to that question. It's very simple. If our workforce is educated and trained, we're going to prosper. And if they're not, we're not. And it's that simple. We've got to be able to have a good answer to that question. Say, yeah, we've got a great workforce. Here's some of the ideas that we have put forward over the last 6 years, some of the bills that we have passed to demonstrate that commitment to workforce development. One is the Mississippi Works Fund. This provides training to unemployed people to help prepare them for the workforce. This is money we put aside to train people to enter the workforce. Mississippi Works Dual Enrollment Option. This allows high school dropouts, people who have stopped going to school, to re-enter the local school district and the community college and get credit in both places at the same time to further expedite their ability to enter the workforce. The MDA Jobs Training Grants. This authorizes MDA to issue grants to colleges to pay portions of the costs associated with training employees. Districts of Innovation allows local school districts to implement ideas to prepare students to enter the workforce that allows them to partner with local employers to say, what do you need, Mr. Employer? What type of employee are you looking for? And we're going to try to help train that employee to match up what you need. And those people can then step straight out of the classroom and enter the workforce ready to go to help the employers. We've also put our money where our mouth is through appropriations and bonding. In 2012, we put $38.5 million into the workforce education program. Over the last 6 years, we have increased that amount every year. And last year, we put $51 million there. That's an increase of 32% over the last 6 years. We've also put $4 million into the MDA Workforce Training Fund. And then in K-12, we have put more money into K-12 than ever in the history of the state. Last year, we put more money there than has ever been put in K-12 education. So I think these programs, these things I've listed, demonstrate just how committed we are to trying to find and produce an educated workforce. It's just not something we talk about. It's something that we've actually done. And moving forward, we're going to continue that emphasis. I saw a couple of quotes recently which I thought were instructive and probably are helpful to us as legislators as we think about this idea of workforce development. A lady named Laura Shinvin, who's the director of the Healthcare Career Advancement Program, says, "Industry is much more nimble than education. Things are changing so quickly in the healthcare industry, we need education to be able to respond just as quickly." In other words, we need to be nimble. Education needs to be nimble and be able to adjust quickly because technology and industry is adjusting so quickly. And we as government, I think, need to be able to be just as nimble, which is a hard thing for government to do. But that is nevertheless a goal. I think we want to be able to be nimble to provide for you what you need in the area of workforce development. Another individual, a gentleman named Lance Laverne, Director of Talent Acquisition at Alcoa, says, "We have to encourage people to think more broadly and more positively about workforce jobs. And then we have to provide them the skills to pursue these jobs." I think that's a great quote as well. We need to be able to encourage our students and our young people to consider jobs in the workforce arena. There are some great jobs out there, career-type jobs, and jobs that pay very well that will help to support a family. And we need those students to begin to think about those types of jobs. And we need to promote those. Your organization needs to do it, and our organization needs to do it. This entire concept about being nimble, preparing educated workforce is one of the motivations behind us rewriting the K-12 formula. As you know, there's been a lot of emphasis, a lot of talk about finding a better way to fund our schools, a more reliable, predictable way. That's one of the things our superintendents complain about is we never know from one year to the next how much we're going to get. So we're trying to work in partnership with them to find a way that is more predictable, more reliable, so that they can be better able to educate their students and meet the needs of those students. Our goal in this formula is to come forward with a student-centered formula, one that is focused on the needs of the students, the makeup of the students. It focuses on what their abilities are and their backgrounds. I think that is a much better way to fund schools than the way we are currently doing it. So that is one of the motivations behind our efforts to rewrite the formula. We're going to continue to work on that. When I meet with your leaders, they always ask me, what can we do to help you? And today I have an answer to that question, 3 things. So I would ask this organization to do 3 things. One is get behind our efforts on roads and bridges, support these ideas, help us find solutions for roads and bridges. Secondly, support our efforts to rewrite the funding formula for education. It will be better, and it will help better prepare students for careers. And then thirdly, help us in our efforts with workforce development. If you want to partner with us, if you want to come alongside of us and help us move Mississippi forward, we need your help in these 3 areas. If you do that, we're all going to make Mississippi more prosperous. Thank you so much for letting me be here with you today. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you not only for focusing on what we consider 3 very strong priorities for MEC going forward, but for your openness to work with us and always being willing to look for ideas. Now, while Speaker Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Reeves maybe are always the ones at the forefront, there are 2 gentlemen that work in both the House and the Senate that are extremely important, and that's the pro tems. And this morning, we're going to hear from our Senate Pro Tem Terry Burton and our House Pro Tem, Speaker Pro Tem Greg Snowden. They're the guys that really, for lack of a better term, keep everybody in line. So at this time, would you please welcome Senator Terry Burton?
I don't have a whole lot to say except this. What you do is important. The calls that you make, the information that you share with us, the letters that we get, the emails that we get from you out there on the front lines of business and industry in Mississippi is important. Those messages ring true with us. Y'all are the ones who are providing the jobs, providing the economic fuel for the economic engine in Mississippi, and we appreciate that. So what you say is important. I hope that you find what I'm about to say as important as what you are telling me sometimes. I'm a former mayor, and I am all about trying to do something about the infrastructure needs in this state. We have to do it right because we only get one opportunity to bite this apple. This will be the one opportunity for a long, long time, so we have to get it right. In cities, infrastructure might mean something different than in counties and at the state level. It includes what's beneath the surface of the roads, the sewer pipes, the water lines that are crumbling around the state and around the nation for that matter. So infrastructure, if we're going to address infrastructure at the city level, we have to address what's beneath the road. What good does it do to go out and put a new bridge in or a new road in if you're going to cave in the next time we get a cold snap or a heat wave? We've got to be smart about it and make sure that cities can do those types of things to address their infrastructure needs. The other thing I wanted to mention is this, and that is you can help us address this infrastructure need too. As business people, as private sector, we need government to do our part, for sure. But we need business people and private sector to do your part because in Mississippi, the need for broadband access in our rural areas is a great need. That is something that government can't do alone. We've got to have partnerships with business and industry to get the internet access out there and the broadband access to our rural areas, particularly our schools, libraries, other educational institutions, but to the average citizen as well. That too is infrastructure in the year 2018. So I'm going to hope that we address some of those issues and have your support in addressing some of those issues as well. The infrastructure needs of cities being a little bit different than what some people think, and the fact that broadband is also, in my opinion, an infrastructure need as well. We have a lot to do this session. This is a session that started early in the year. Earliest possible time we could start is noon on January 2nd, and that's when we kicked off. Next year, we'll start at the latest possible time we can start, according to the Constitution, noon on January 8th. But we started early this year, and we have hit the ground running. We've got a lot to do dealing with Medicaid, authorization of Medicaid, the infrastructure needs, all of those issues that we've talked about during the off season. We've got 3,000 bills that'll be introduced and start coming across the desks. So we've got a lot of work to do. Bear with us as we try to do the business that you've asked us to do by electing us to come here and serve and be there when we need an answer to a question as to how we can help you. What is best for business? What is best for the economy? What is best for the industries in Mississippi? I'm going to be asking those questions of you, and I hope you'll come and talk to me about it at any time. Open door policy, always. Isn't that right? You know it. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. And now please join me in welcoming Speaker Pro Tem of the House, Greg Snowden.
I do want to thank you for having me here. I have notes, by the way. The speaker is one of those preachers that preaches without notes. Y'all have had those kind of preachers before, probably. They're generally the best ones. You know, at my seminary of law school, we use notes. So I'm sorry, I do have notes. And first thing I want to do, other than thank you, is to congratulate Matt Luke here for the interim. No, wait a second. That's Scott Waller. Scott Waller for having the interim tag. Well, you know, see, Matt Luke, that's SEC, and Scott Waller, that's MEC. It's an honest mistake, you understand. But I do want to congratulate Scott. Your organization's in great hands. I do want to ask you to do something this morning. I've always enjoyed speaking with you. I've always tried to address matters of substance. And I want you to engage with us on an issue, really beyond the three that the speaker spoke about. This organization is very good on engaging in issues. Some you choose to, some you choose not to. You did not engage an organization on Initiative 42, and I understand that. I was a little disappointed by it, but I understand that. You have heavily engaged on transportation and infrastructure issues, and that's very important that you do that and continue to do that. We have an education process, I think, in this state. I believe that the public, by and large, is learning to appreciate what the need is for infrastructure. I mean, you can only hit so many potholes and it kind of dawns on you. But I'm not sure yet they're to the point of understanding that they are going to need to pay for it if it's to be improved. And that's an education process that cannot be overlooked, and I think this organization is as well positioned as anyone to do that. But the issue I want to ask you to engage on this morning relates to the accusation, if you will, that Republicans are bankrupting this state because of corporate tax cuts, corporate giveaways to cronies and fat cats and that sort of thing. And I want to remind you that MEC was very much engaged on these issues, and properly so. We didn't do this because MEC asked us to. We did it because we're convinced and believe still that it's good policy and it's good for the people of Mississippi. But we want to re-engage, I guess might be the best way to say it, to remind people what we have done and why we've done it. Now, there are quite a few so-called tax breaks since 2012. Is a long list that's circulated. They include such things as we did an exemption for guided tour activities and certain livestock admissions and parking. You know, that's a tax cut. And we reduced rates on the sales of power and fuel to oil and gas producers. We wanted to spur production, particularly in the Gulf Coast area. That's a tax cut. We did a historic property income tax credit, which does also impact. George Thomas is over here in the city of Meridian. We're very proud in Meridian that apparently we're going to have the historic 3-foot building renovated and will soon be a Courtyard by Marriott in downtown Meridian. That would not happen and could not happen without that historic tax credit bill that the legislature passed. So that's another tax cut. We exempted the sales of tangible personal property to raise funds for schools. You know, I guess you can argue about that policy if you want to, but we think that was the thing to do. And that's a tax cut. We exempted sales for tax on utilities, tax for utilities paid by churches, utility bills paid by churches. Again, I guess you can quibble with that policy, but it's something we decided we wanted to do and needed to do. Now, most of these things don't really amount to much in the sense of a lot of money, and the consensus is, and I think accurately so, there have basically been 3 large pieces of legislation since 2012 that have really had the most impact on the general fund budget. I just want to refresh your memory on what those are. First of all, in 2012, the legislature passed Senate Bill 2934, which dealt with the inventory tax. Now, how many years have I been coming to MEC prior to 2012 when members here cussed the inventory tax? It's uncompetitive, put us behind the 8 ball in dealing with states, particularly surrounding states, and left us really at a disadvantage. Now, what did the legislature do with the inventory tax? We did not eliminate it. In fact, I think it's very important, particularly with the municipal officials here, maybe some county officials as well, to remind you that what the legislature did was to credit, we devised a way to give the relief to the taxpayer, but to credit, do that through a credit that would preserve the revenue for the localities. So basically, we chose to take a hit in the general fund and protect the municipalities and the counties while doing away, in essence, with this very unpopular and unfair tax. Now, MEC was all in that fight, all right? We want to remind you of that. We hadn't forgotten that. We don't want you to forget that. And by the way, that tax cut, when it came to a vote in the Senate, passed by a vote of 39 to 8, and in the House by a vote of 108 to 14. Now, does that sound like a partisan measure to you? If you know the numbers in the House and Senate, you know that is a strong bipartisan bill. And the inventory tax was passed with strong bipartisan support. We haven't forgotten that either, and we're not going to be accused otherwise. We're going to remind people of that. Secondly, in 2014, the legislature passed Senate Bill 2065, which is a complicated and somewhat involved bill, but basically excluded deferred gains and deferred income from the computation of capital and paid-in capital surplus and retained earnings. It basically led to a better way, a fairer way of recalculating corporate tax. And again, this is something that was fair, made us more competitive. And I've got to tell you, when this came to the floor in the House and Senate on final passage, the vote in the Senate was 51 to 0. The vote in the House was 121 to 0. Now, you have a measure here, one of the 3 big items of tax cuts, if you will, that supposedly had wreaked such havoc, that was passed unanimously by this legislature for good reason, good policy reason. You were in that fight as well, and I want to remind you of that and ask you to remind others of that. Now, finally, 2016, the Taxpayer Pay Raise Act of 2016, Senate Bill 2858, did essentially 3 things, some other things, but basically it phased out the 3% bracket on income tax on the first $5,000 of taxable income, individual income tax cut. Revises the deduction for self-employed individuals, which for those of you that are self-employed is certainly a positive thing. And also it phased out the franchise tax over 10 years with a final repeal effective January 1, 2028. Now, if there was a more hated tax than the inventory tax, it's the franchise tax. How many times have I heard that from members of this organization? I mean, it's certainly the truth. Tax on capital, whether you make any money or not, most states don't have such a thing. Terribly uncompetitive, terribly unfair, and it's job killing, all right? Remarkably, our friend across the aisle acknowledged much of that, but they did have a problem with the reduction in revenue and said so. We had an honest and open policy discussion about that, about whether or not we should continue this unfair tax, this uncompetitive tax, just because we needed the money. Now, in 2015, if you remember, this matter came to the floor for a vote, and it failed to pass. We didn't have the numbers in the House at that time. These were pre-supermajority days. You'll look, this is the headline of the Clarion Ledger on Thursday, March the 19th, 2015. Democrats for state tax cuts. Now, they did this openly, honestly, good policy discussion. They made their decision. I'm not dogging them for them, that's what happened. We did not have a supermajority, and we were not able to have a 3/5 vote to approve that tax measure. So what did we do? 2015 is an election year. We went to the polls that fall and campaigned on tax relief that we believe that people of Mississippi deserved. And guess what? They sent us here with the supermajority we asked for. And in 2016, it did come to the floor and we were able to pass it. And we're glad we did. And I guess you can call that one a Republican tax cut because it's basically party line, although not exactly. I invite you to look at that vote. You'll find some surprises there, I think, on both sides of the aisle. But we're proud of this, and I want to remind you all, again, MEC was behind this effort. The three big tax efforts that we're being dogged for, pretty much, were things MEC was for, and for good reason. We want you to remember that. We want you to preach that. Lord knows you preached it when you wanted it passed. Help us now. The people need to understand that. The public needs to understand this. Now, most of you have been around the block several times. Somebody calls you a corporate fat cat. You're probably not personally offended. You know hogwash when you hear it, right? But you should have an interest in putting the truth out. And the truth is, these were good measures, good policy measures, bipartisan measures, all except for the last one, which again was directly presented to the voters themselves, and they made that choice about who they sent here. So I ask you to engage, or more properly, to re-engage on these issues. These are being talked about a lot, and we're going to continue to remind folks the good they've done and that they were bipartisan by and large, and we want to invite you to help us do that. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity as always. I hope I didn't run on too long. Thank you.